keep your mics on mute. We would appreciate it. It is my joy to welcome all of you as we gather to honor the Reverend Dr. Donald Shriver Jr., President Emeritus of Union Theological Seminary and the William E. Dodge Professor Emeritus of Applied Christianity. Our president, the Reverend Dr. Serene Jones, was looking forward to being here tonight, but sadly she is feeling unwell and asked me to stand in for her and to share her deep appreciation to Don Shriver for his many contributions to theology, ethics, and higher education throughout his service as Union's president from 1975 to 1991. A leading ethicist, Dr. Shriver is an ordained Presbyterian minister who has belonged to the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations since 1988. He has taught ethics at Union, Columbia University, Jewish Theological Seminary, and Emory University, to mention a few, written 13 books, including An Ethic for Enemies, Forgiveness in Politics, and has lectured worldwide. In 2009, he was awarded the 18th Grawemeyer Award in Religion for the ideas he set forth in his 2005 book, Honest Patriots, Loving a Country Enough to Remember Its Misdeeds. I would be remiss to speak about Don Shriver without also mentioning Dr. Peggy Shriver. Peggy unofficially served as Don's co-president when he was president at Union. She is a formidable force in her own right, and it is well known that the Shrivers faced every tough decision together with prayer, support, and mutual respect. As a testament to their deep impact on this community, they were jointly awarded the Union Medal, Union's highest honor, in 1991 for embodying the seminary's mission out in the world. Don and Peggy Shriver's commitment to their Union family is a bright light that continues to shine in this institution. So thank you all once again for joining us tonight to celebrate this lifelong contribution to theology and theological education represented in Christian Ethics and Conversation, a Festschrift in honor of Donald W. Shriver Jr., 13th president of Union Theological Seminary. It is now my pleasure to turn over this evening's event to Dr. Isaac Sharp. Isaac recently received his PhD from Union and is currently our Director of Certificate Programming and a visiting professor. Isaac has been instrumental in bringing together this Festschrift, and I want to take this opportunity to extend publicly a special thank you, Isaac, from President Jones and from myself for taking a leading role in making this important work available to the public. Dr. Sharp.
Thank you, Reverend Davey, for that introduction and your kind words. The project would not have been possible without the support of the Executive Vice President's Office and the President's Office, so I thank you to my colleagues again for that. Welcome, friends, to the launch and celebration of Christian Ethics and Conversation, a Festschrift in honor and celebration of the life or career of Dr. Donald W. Shriver Jr., the 13th president of Union Seminary. I see a lot of folks that have been involved in various stages of the project here in your little squares on my screen. Many that I have emailed with almost unendingly, but who I'm now seeing for the first time. So, you know, occasionally technology can be kind of cool, right? I wish we were seeing each other in person and meeting in person, but I'm thankful that we're seeing each other nonetheless. I'm going to be brief because, like many of you, I'd prefer to hear from folks like Dr. Forbes and Dr. Walton, who have chapters in the book that you definitely should read. And I know a number of our other contributors are here observing with us as well, so my thanks to them for joining. Before we get to words of reflection from some of our contributors, though, I want to quickly give you a brief behind the scenes story about me and my role in the project. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Isaac Sharp, and as Reverend Davies said, I am currently Director of Certificate Programming and Visiting Professor here at Union. Before I was that, though, I was a doctoral student here at Union in social ethics. My advisor was the brilliant scholar, professor, activist, and one of the best Christians I know, Dr. Gary Dorian. I graduated with my PhD in 2019. And in addition to my work at Union, my current academic work involves recovering some of the lost histories of different kinds of evangelicalism than the one that currently exists in this country, including actually the liberal kind that Union used to champion in an earlier generation. Now that this book is finished, my next book will be about that, so be on the lookout, a little preview commercial there for that. But by now you might be wondering how it is that a recent Union PhD graduate got involved in a project like this, celebrating and honoring the scholar, Christian ethicist, Presbyterian churchman, and yes, former Union Seminary president, Dr. Don W. Shriver. After all, I never got the opportunity to study with Dr. Shriver during his illustrious academic and presidential career. And the main reason for that is because I was 3 years old when he retired from the presidency, and I was about 8 years old when he retired from teaching at Union. I have now, though, nonetheless, become a student of Dr. Shriver's. And one of the many ways that this has happened is taken straight from the book's title, Conversation. See, from the time I joined the project a little over a year and a half ago, Dr. Shriver and I have been in very regular conversation. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that we are both Southern transplants. I'm from Tennessee, accustomed to neighborly drop-ins that turn into hour-long conversations. But whatever the reason, early on, we both decided that the easiest way for us to take care of business on the project would be via face-to-face chats, rather than primarily through phone calls or emails. Though the pandemic foiled our routine, there for a while, we were having almost bi-weekly discussions in the Shriver's living room about politics, current events, history, Christian ethics, and yes, the book project. I was also in conversation with Dr. Shriver via his work. And not just his work, I was also in conversation with the work of his students and friends and colleagues who contributed to the volume. An interdisciplinary, interinstitutional, and interfaith team of folks that is as star-studded a lineup for a project like this as I've ever seen. The last thing that I want to say before hearing more from some of our contributors is to make note of one final way in which Dr. Shriver and I were in conversation before I could have even realized it. One of the themes that surfaces in many of the essays in the book involves the kinds of decisions President Shriver had to make while guiding a place that anyone with any familiarity knows has never been easy to lead, which is probably an understatement. And one of his decisions involved refusing to entertain the idea either of moving Union elsewhere or of jettisoning the PhD or MDiv programs whenever the inevitable cost-cutting questions came up. He later reflected that one of the motivations behind this decision was a sense of responsibility to future generations of seminary students. And, well, here I am. I was trained in a program on a campus in an institution, the current existence of which in part are products of Dr. Shriver's willingness to think in conversation with the future. And my training was pretty good, if I do say so myself. After all, it gave me some of the skills necessary to finish this book, which feels like a perfect way to close this introductory circle and for me to stop talking. So that's welcome, and that's my intro to the background of the book. And let's hear now from some of our contributors. Let's begin. I'm not sure Dr. Dorian has been able to join us yet. So we will begin with the Harry Emerson Fosdick Distinguished Professor Emeritus, the Reverend Dr. James A. Forbes Jr., who is with us tonight. It is a pleasure for me to meet Dr. Forbes this way digitally for the first time. Welcome, Dr. Forbes.
Unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Hear you just fine.
I am delighted to have an opportunity to join in saying thank you to Don and Peggy. They were not only the people who invited me to Union Seminary, but shepherded me through my own pilgrimage through that wonderful place. And when asked to make a contribution to the Festschrift, it was easy to say, yes, anything I can do to honor Don and Peggy, I'm in. So I would like to simply say, first of all, Don, it's a wonderful thing to run into a Southern white man who abhors tokenism. Can you imagine that you had the audacity not only to convene not only the most wonderful faculty you could find, but include Jim Forbes and Jim Cone and Sam Roberts and actually eventually Cornel West and Bob Hood. If you talk about tokenism, you could have done well just to invite one or two Black folks in there. I don't think you were hired for that purpose, but you abhor tokenism. Secondly, the title of the Festschrift, Conversations in Christian Ethics, I too share what Brother Sharp has said. One of my most wonderful moments during my career as a pastor at Riverside was the continuing conversations we had at your apartment with you and Peggy, and the occasional opportunity to have a meal or two there. That was so wonderful. It was like coming into a theological salon to be with you and Peggy in that way. Now, my article, which was about divine aesthetics, was so important to me because I think as a Christian ethicist, you constantly tried to help us to look at whatever values we were talking about in the light of the divine revelation. And for that reason, even after I left the New York area, went to Duke, if I was getting ready to do a course like on preaching and the idea of Jubilee, I could not do it without conversations with you about what on earth would it look like in America to preach about Jubilee justice, not Republican justice, Democratic virtue, liberal virtues, or even the values of liberals, but what would Jubilee justice look like? Well, we had wonderful conversations. Now there's one last one before I sign off, and that is because we have seen so much lying during the last few years, I think a major topic ought to be, how is it that so many people are willing to dismiss truth as more than a virtue that we talk about in seminary? In fact, Don, I want to talk to you the next chance I get about lying. What will the consequences be in America to living through a period where we pass through a pandemic of mendacity? I can hardly wait for us to get together again. Meanwhile, God bless you for all the honor you are about to receive.
Thank you, Dr. Forbes. This is Dr. Forbes referenced his essay "Divine Aesthetics" in the volume, and it is one not to miss. Believe you me, you get lots of perspectives on his time in and around all of the institutions of the Morningside Heights neighborhood, and it's one that I learned a lot from. So be on the lookout for that essay, friends, from Dr. Forbes in the book itself. I think next we will hear from Dr. Janet Walton, Professor Emerita of Worship here at Union. Dr. Walton, are you with us?
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Don and Peggy for this wonderful opportunity. When Don approached me about writing something for his book, he asked me to tell the story. And so tonight, I'm going to briefly tell his story in relation to my appointment at Union. As a preparation for writing a chapter in Don's Festschrift, I went to visit Peggy and Don. I asked Don why he came to Union. He answered 3 things: that he was open to new possibilities, that he wanted to develop an expanded sense of self, and to take some risks, which he had a lot of. It was the late 70s, with tremendous energy in theological education around issues of injustice, as it still is today. The faculty was addressing these concerns in the classroom, but not so much during worship. One day, a pipe broke in the organ. To repair it required adjustment to the physical structure of the chapel. With the substantial effort and support of Rosie Havemeyer, the chair of the board, and her own sense that something needed to be happening in worship that wasn't, the board made the decision to renovate the chapel. In Don's words, the time was not right for a form of worship which was formal and somewhat rigid. We had pews, as did most churches. We had an architectural setup which was pulpit-centered. And, he continued, although that suited my own Protestant dispositions, it was in conflict with an increasing sense in the churches, Protestant and Catholic, that worship is something that belongs to the people, which is symbolized more by a circle than parallel lines of seats. There was significant resistance to the decision about the renovation. Don received many phone calls about it. The chapel, some people felt, was destroyed. And to that, Don answered, yes, it was destroyed in order to create other things. In Don's words again, it was clearing out of the space, not to make it empty, but to require the leaders to decide how to fill it. The space itself became a call to worship. The chapel was renovated a few years after Don arrived. He asked me to coordinate the chapel events and services, adding that worship would now be 4 days a week. Thankfully, he also asked Jim Forbes to be a part of this leadership. Don came to worship every single day. He set the tone for faculty leadership. Though there were daily critiques, Don was not the first to speak. He waited. He watched. And after a time, he offered his ideas. Another faculty member, Bob Handy, stood at the door every day to collect the communal responses. That was really brave. No one could have predicted what happened. Over these 40 years, the chapel has been a pivotal part of imagining and practicing ways to live in this demanding world. Professor Larry Rasmussen puts it this way: the renovated chapel services kept the seminary alive, put in place union to come. In the midst of financial migraines, a changing student body, and commitments to ecumenism and liberation theology, worship and the arts enabled a changed and pliable chapel, the likes of which Union had not known and would not have imagined, from what the likes of it which Union's highly predictable services were rich with diversity. Don, thank you. You bet on the community when you agreed to the renovation of James Chapel. You did not know how a space could empower the community to provide what each person needed. Don's openness to take this risk and to be there as it unfolded has set a pattern, not only for the Union community, but to others as well. These are his words. I wanted a space in which we could be more free. And that was what blossomed. And so it was. And so it is. And so I hope that it will be in the future. And for that, Don and Peggy, I say thank you very much.
Thank you to Dr. Walton for your reflections and for your contribution to the Festschrift in the form of the chapter reflecting on the many changes in worship at Union Seminary, which the effects of which are still felt to this day. I think next we'll go to hear from my co-editor, Chris Ioso, who has I am sure plenty to contribute to our conversation as the other half of this book. Chris, after you.
Isaac, it's a pleasure. It's a delight to thank all of the contributors and to thank some of them, in my case, for their great patience. Even Don himself, of course, and Peggy, for their patience. The project started with a few of us, one of whom I'll say a bit more about, Dean Thompson's contribution, but Steve Phelps and Rich Knox were also part of the original group that felt, because Don was the president, he was teaching, co-teaching with all kinds of the professional schools of Columbia, really, but had less direct teaching at Union, and hence the Festschrift took a little extra time to kind of bring together. My own essay in it reflects on Don's leadership in the Presbyterian Church and the ecumenical movement, and in relation to social change organizations. He was heavily involved in a lot of that before coming to Union. One of his last efforts in the Southern Presbyterian Church before the reunion, before his coming to Union, was convening a big ecumenical conference in that denomination. So for people who knew him in the former Southern Presbyterian Church, it wasn't a great surprise that he would be the kind of adventurer to go into Northern Territory in a war of reconciliation and to, in fact, help upbuild the whole church through an ecumenical seminary. My own acquaintance with Don goes back to his work in the presbytery. So he was involved both on the national level of his denomination and in a local presbytery, chairing the Social Justice Committee. And Isaac mentions the kind of dynamic of complexity and even controversy and contention that was part of managing or pretending to manage Union for many of the years that he was president. Well, during that same time, he was involved in struggles in the denomination and even struggles in New York City. We did a hearing at one point on economic inequality and its impact on education in the public schools of New York City. He did a conference on criminal justice reform in New York State, trying to get rules changed regarding isolation and the placing of young inmates in with much older inmates. I won't go into all those pieces. I invite you obviously to read the books if you haven't yet. But the crucial pieces that are non-seminary related have to do with the history of how the Southern Presbyterian Church became ready for reunion and the kinds of changes in ethos that were part of that and part of the group that Don worked with from an early period. Dean Thompson's essay, and Dean was part of the original group. Dean Thompson's essay is invaluable, kind of church history, particularly for Presbyterians, but very influential. Eric Mount was another very progressive Southerner involved in the church at that time. I would just say another piece about the leadership that Don exercised. It was in co-authoring with other really people from different disciplines, social scientists. In the background of this, there are several books that I put out on the shelf, but that co-editing outreach into the kind of conversation of ethics is a big part of the book. And I encourage you all to be aware of that, potentially in gifting it to people who are not theologians or ethics people. The last piece I would say is that I came out of a different seminary for my MDiv. I was an anti-apartheid activist. I joined the committee that he chaired in New York City Presbytery and was inspired to come to Union Seminary for the doctoral study by Don's example. At the previous seminary, I'd been head of the student body, and we withheld our class gift over investments in South Africa. What a change then to be arrested with the president of Union Seminary blocking the South African consulate. That's a different kind of leadership. And it was very much not in the classroom, but it was very real. So I will just say thank you again to all the contributors, to Isaac, to Gary, with whom I would sometimes stay when visiting and working on the book. I hope that all of you who have not read it yet will be able to enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we will hear from the man himself here shortly. But before we do that, I would like to open it up and see if anybody else who is joining us as observers and participants have any reflections or questions or thanks or words of affirmation that you would like to offer. And if you do, you can either raise your hand and we will try to recognize you, or say something in the chat that you would like to share something, and we will try to call on you. So if anybody has anything that they feel they would like to share, or any questions about the book. Yeah, I see one immediately hand up. Penny Greer.
Don and Peggy, it has been years since I have ever talked with you. I was a pastor in the United Church of Christ for 35 years. I retired 3 years ago. Since then, I've become more or less a scientist, getting a geology degree, and now I'm working on a degree in climate. But I will never forget the wonderful thing we did together, as we both loved James Luther Adams. And while I was at Union from 1977 to 1979, as Roger Shin called me a refugee from Harvard, that was his name for me, and that was probably fitting, you put together a wonderful celebration of Jim, and he came and so blessed the community with all that he has to offer. And it was such a privilege for me to be with you, who was so directly tutored by him and taught by him. I was another generation who had had contact with him. What a wonderful thing you did at that time, and so many other things. Your wise leadership as president, when we were all starting to debate South African divestment. And I remember not being quite with all my classmates. I was, I guess, more in the middle. You governed yourself with great wisdom, and it's been too long. What a wonderful celebration today for you and your life's work, and Peggy too.
Thanks so much. Anyone else?
Hello, do you see me?
Yeah, Dr. Oscar Owens, please.
God bless you all. I just want to say thank you to Dr. Shriver. I was a student back in the 80s in the MDiv program, and was in the Baptist church at the time, at Abyssinian Baptist, working there. And then I left Union and came back to Second Baptist in Los Angeles, a very historic church pastored by Dr. Thomas Kilgore. And then ended up in the Church of God in Christ under Bishop Charles Blake over the Church of God in Christ. But Dr. Shriver, it was great to hear the story of how you helped bring on Dr. Forbes and Dr. Cone and Dr. James Washington and all those folks. Thank you, because you made those professors made such a great difference in my life. They were such a blessing. Dr. Forbes and Dr. Cone and Dr. Cornel West, all of them. And you were always very welcoming. I felt as an African-American student that you were a welcoming presence to us. And so I just thank you so much, and God bless you. Congratulations on your work and your life. God bless you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Owens. I think we had next Dr. Clifford Green, I believe.
That's correct, Isaac. Don, there's something that is very special to you and also to Peggy that we must remember at this time. It was you who, along with your friend Helmut Weiland from Germany, decided to establish the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair in Theology and Ethics at Union Seminary. And although there are other parts of the world where Bonhoeffer scholarship happens, this is the only chair in the whole world that is the Bonhoeffer Chair. We certainly need the educational work that the next holder of the chair should be able to do. There are a lot of very good younger people doing research on Bonhoeffer right now. There are plenty of people in the public world, even a person with a name beginning with M, who is in fact a very devout supporter of a man whose name begins with T. Anyway, so we have to purge away the falsehoods and the misappropriations of Bonhoeffer by sound scholarship. And we know from your generosity and your families and the work being done also by the German funders that we have a search committee in process, and we expect that in the foreseeable future, your vision about a Bonhoeffer Chair at Union Seminary will come to fruition. So thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. I see we have Dr. Pollock would like to add something, one of our esteemed contributors. Please, Dr. Pollock.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to say something about Don and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Some years after we met, Don arranged with his successor as Chancellor, Joe Huff, to have Union send me as an emissary to a meeting in Berlin in honor of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I was honored, frightened, and amazed to find myself so much at home in this event. I ended my talk with a reflection on the importance of telling the truth. In the context of this event in honor of Don, I'll quote what I said then and hope that you will agree that I was also articulating the importance of real conversation at times like the ones we have been in for the past few years, when it is ever easier to get either angry or frightened or both. I said then, it took only the first month of life under National Socialism for Bonhoeffer to decide to tell his fellow pastors that it was time to, quote, be a spoke in the wheel, end quote. By the rest of his short life, he teaches us today that only by telling the unwelcome truth early and often, while we are free to do so, can we hope never to have to be spokes in the wheel ourselves. Thank you so much, Don, for giving Amy and me the gift of your conversation. Since writing our own book, Amy and I have understood your capacity for true shared conversation to be a gift of love. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pollack. Anyone else have any? Dr. Crawford, I see, has would like to share something. Yeah, please, Dr. Crawford.
It is Don and Peggy, I trust that we'll hear from you in a moment. I have been very grateful to be a contributor, and I know there are so many who could do this from student days. And so it is that I said a few things in this wonderful Festschrift, the book, about which Don had two very special goals and hopes. One was that this Festschrift come together and be in print, and two, that Donald Trump be defeated. I am very glad to say that both have been arrived at in some distinct ways. I also, when Janet and others have borne witness to the life of the community and in particular the worship space, that Don's commitment to that space and the experience of community in worship was also noted and accompanied by an initiative that literally tore down the wall that separated the James Chapel entryway from the refectory. Hence, there could be this movement from one space to another. That was indicative of so much in the life of Union Seminary under Don's leadership. This call and sense of community and coming together. I want to just bear witness to that with thanks for that. And great appreciation. So glad that we have arrived to this point of this Festschrift, and with great blessing and thanks to you, dear Don and Peggy. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. We could, I think, share memories and reflections all night about Dr. Shriver and his contribution, but to try to stick to somewhat of a schedule and to honor your all's time, I now would like to hand it over to the man himself for some words and thoughts and reflections about the project and anything else that he would like to share with us, because I'm always willing to learn from him. Dr. Shriver?
Well, thank you, first of all, to all of you who have just spoken. All of you were instrumental in my 16-year stint as president of Union. I think I should say, first of all, that when that search committee came to Atlanta to explore the possibility I might be the next president of Union Seminary, I was particularly concerned about the rehabilitation of Union as an institution. That seemed to me to be a huge challenge, and one that I never applied for, but which they insisted on inviting me to undertake. Institutions the word institution in that mid-1970s tended to be a bad word in the rhetoric of the anti-Vietnam War movement that was so active on the Columbia campus, but also with the participation of Union Seminary students. In some ways, the challenge of that search committee to me had to do with my deciding that institutions were a worthy vessel for holding something precious for the future. It certainly was the case when you think about Paul the Apostle's statement in one of his letters, we hold this treasure in an earthen vessel. Well, the earthen vessel of Union Seminary in 1975 needed some repairs, and I was honored and intimidated by the possibility that I might become the repair person, among others. When I was invited to become the union's 13th president, there was abroad in the world of theological education the rumor that Union was going out of business. Its financial problems were large. Its human relations problems were large too. And I took a great deal of interest in the advice which the president of the seminary that I was then employed with, Emory Seminary in Atlanta. This was Jim Laney. He said to me, if you accept this job of being president of Union, you will find that nothing you want to do can be done without the collaboration of other people. I think he knew I was something of an individualist, and he wanted to keep me warned that you can be president of this, that, or the other, but you are not the only person to make decisions or otherwise to find yourself asked to make decisions. I have to thank all the writers of this book. There are about 25 of them. Some of you have spoken in this Zoom connection. And I want to be thankful to all of you who've spoken on this occasion for your collaboration in the making of decisions that would help rehabilitate Union Seminary. The rehabilitation was multidimensional. Some of it was just in human relationships. You know, theologians and theological students are capable of great anger at each other. And in my first year or two at Union, I had experienced more anger in this institution than I realized was possible among people who were pledged to help lead the church in the name of the gospel of Jesus. But rehabilitating the personal relationships of faculty members and of students, all in relationship to administrators like myself, was almost a daily task at Union. And I realized that it was a task that required a lot of collaboration. I had a professor at Union Seminary in Richmond who believed that the seminary that was then employing him was kept together in the midst of its controversies by the collaboration of 3 or 4 people, key people in that institution. And my experience at Union matched that too. I'm very grateful to all those who wrote these fine essays, but I'm most of all grateful to the people who did the work of reconciliation between hostile students and a hostile administration, between faculty members who had not always cared for each other. And with other friends of Union who supported the place financially, aware that finance is an area in which the grace of God needs to be operative also. So I owe a lot to the board of directors. I have to say that the search committee that came after me in Atlanta in 1975 was such an impressive group of people that they helped convert me to the idea that maybe I should become the next president of Union Seminary. I have to say I never applied for the job, but the job did apply to me. And this, for me, I'm very grateful for the members of that committee, some of whom survived to this day and were and still are friends of that institution. Institutions are the means by which what's valuable in one generation of human beings is preserved for the next generation. As Isaac Sharp has commented about his sense that Union was worth preserving, partly because as a 10-year-old child, he had begun to think about the possibility of theological education. And I've always understood that in the work of an administrator, in any organization really, but especially in Union Seminary, the longer you are in the job, the more long range are your aspirations for the future. The daily concerns of faculty appointments and accepting students and preparing lessons for the next class, all of that is very important. But its importance is as much as anything in terms of how well it prepares somebody for a long-range devotion of life, which we call vocation. The longer I was a president at Union, the more I understood that the decisions of the present have long-range implications for the future. And more is the reason to be concerned with care about those decisions, because what you do now is going to be done on behalf of the future. Finally, I just want to thank all of those who have been instrumental in putting this book together. I have always tried in introducing the authors to the possibility they might contribute to it. I've always tried to tell them that this book has to be about Union Seminary more than about me as a person. I'm deeply touched by the kinds of tributes that you'll find in some of these essays. But most of all, the book is worth reading and was worth getting produced because we all are committed to something that has about the serious business of being committed to something which is true and which was embodied in the personhood of Jesus of Nazareth. When Jesus was gathering those disciples around him, he was thinking about what was the long-range significance of his life and that of that small group of disciples, trying to prepare for the future is what institutions are all about. And I have never recovered from the honor of being asked to help prepare Union to be a servant of the future. That's part of my vocation, my sense of calling, that we repair institutions in order to offer a repaired reconciliation of example to the future. The very fact that Union remains there on the corner of Broadway and 120th Street, and 120th has now been renamed to Reinhold Niebuhr Place. The fact that that school is still there is a tribute to the people of my era who worked together to make sure that it would still be there. Nobody has to tell me that Jim Lamey was correct when he said you have to be sure that the job of being the president is not simply your job alone, but it belongs to a variety of other people whom you need as partners. On behalf of that partnership, which I have been benefited from in all these years, I want to thank all of you who have contributed to this book. Not everybody in retirement has a book written about them. This is a very generous book, and I'm pleased to note that none of the authors of these 25 essays went into, delved into what were the shortcomings of my administration. That I was not a perfect president was evident to me. If I didn't know that personally, there were plenty of people around that kept telling me how imperfect was something I was trying to do. And I thank you for their criticism too, especially when it was grounded in a hope that this institution could become a servant of God's intentions in the form of theological education and its institutions. Theological education is a group project. It was my privilege to be assisted by a group of you in such a way that I became a president. Maybe worth having a book written about his time in the job. I'm grateful for the book. I'm most grateful for the collaborations that are exemplified by the ministry of all those who made contributions to it. And therefore, I simply want to thank you for your participation in that project. And thank you for all the things that I learned from you that I would never have learned all by myself. In Bob Pollock's essay in the book, he lays claim to the thought that in his conversations with me, he became aware of things in himself that he had not otherwise been aware of. I'm very grateful for that tribute from Bob Pollock because he's one of the most learned people that I know. I'd like to think that maybe in his conversations with me that we may have discovered something about the Jewish heritage that Bob Pollock learned to value and cherish. I'd like to be worthy of the truth that Desmond Tutu so embodied in his work, but also in his writings, especially when he said, "I am because we are." That's about as important a nugget of wisdom from African culture as anything I know about. I am because we are. American individualism does not fit very well with that truth. But people like you have embodied that wisdom in a way that helped make me a president. And I would have to say the idea of putting the word conversation on the title of this book is for me a very precious thing to have. I'd like my life to be noted as the instigator of conversations that needed to be instigated. So for all of you as conversation partners, I am very grateful. And I live to be a witness to the kinds of collaboration that is possible between people of various commitments and backgrounds, but who can join together for the preservation of what is most important in human life. So thank you for this event, and I hope that the good work of of Roger Sharp and Chris also, and getting this book together will become a pleasure to you as well. So thanks to all for putting this event together. I have received your blessings and your thanks with my own equivalent of blessing and thanks extended to you.
Oh, that was good.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shriver. That was wonderful. And again, on behalf of Reverend Dr. Serene Jones, President, just want to express our deep appreciation for all you've done to make sure that this institution remained, and we want to honor the work that you've done, that you and Peggy have done to make sure that Union remained a viable institution at the corner of 120th Street.
Amen.
So thank you. Before we go to Rita Walters, our VP for Vice President for Development, I want to bring to you Reverend Dr. Cornel West. I'm sorry, Dr. Cornel West. I keep doing I did that the last time I introduced you. I am responsible for his not being here when we thought he was going to be here, because I actually mistakenly texted him the wrong date, and then just realized that tonight and reached back out to him. When I originally asked him if he would join, he did not hesitate and said he wouldn't miss it for the world. When I texted and said, "Oops, it looks like we may have made a mistake here," he said, "I'll be right there." And so I will. Here he is. I will turn the virtual floor over to Dr. West. Cornel.
Well, my brother, I just want to say that it was nothing but the Holy Spirit that allowed me to be in a place where I could be tended to in such a way that I know that this was taking place. I was looking forward to this for tomorrow night, because when it comes to my dear brother Donald Shriver, words fail. And when it comes to precious Peggy, language collapses. I'm talking about over 40 some years of genuine love and respect of each other, beginning when I was 23 years old, all the way up to just a few months ago when we still break bread regularly at the restaurant on LaSalle Street. Why? Because here we have a vanilla brother from the South and a chocolate brother from California who came together in a genuine love, friendship, brotherhood, sisterhood. And as I say in the foreword, that Don Shriver is not just a great exemplar of prophetic leadership. I consider him the great prophetic leader of theological education. And one of the reasons being that he brought together the best of his own liberal evangelical sensibilities from the South with the towering legacies of Tillich and Niebuhr, but also the Harvard training of Talcott Parsons. And then here comes liberation theology. Here comes James Cone. Here comes Beverly Harrison. And what he would do is bring together one of the greatest preachers of the 20th century in Jim Forbes. What he would do would bring together the greatest historian of the masses of Black people, my best friend in the world, James Melvin Washington. What he would do is bring together Walleen Dotson, Samuel Roberts. One can go on and on. We were the center of Black theological education, conversant with the best in the West, but rooted in the struggle of Black people that constitutes a leaven in the American democratic loaf. That was because of a brother named Donald Shriver. And the world must never forget that. And then on a personal level, it's just hard to meet a person who's just more genuine. And a person who I meet at the cross, in the blood, the bottom of that cross. A sincere Christian at the deepest level. And I learned by his example, I learned by the books he reads, I learned by the challenge that he has presented. And I'm just so glad that both of them are still around. I'm telling you, 1977 is a long time ago for me, because I should have been dead a long time ago. But here they are, strong as ever, with their kids. I can see Lionel right now sitting there in the living room writing her essays for Barnett. And now she's a towering novelist in her own right. We can go on and on and on. I'll stop, because you all have, I'm sure, shared so many words with Brother Don and Sister Peggy. But I'm just so glad, Brother Fred, you hit me at the right time. I just finished the dialogue with Zizak for a whole hour and a half. And when I saw your note, I said, Zizak, I got to go. I got to go. Don Shriver's event is tonight rather than tomorrow night. And I'm just so glad I got in on the tail end, just to say a little bit so I could share what's inside of my heart, mind, and soul that connects me to the best of the past. This walk down memory lane at Union Seminary in 1977. Whew, Lord, stealing away with Forbes and Washington. Engaging Sister Bear, Tom Driver around the corner. We can go on and on. I won't go on and on, but thank you, Brother Don. Thank you, Sister Peggy, for your witness, for your work, and for your love. And at a time in which the American empire looks like it's imploding, not enough talk about integrity, not enough talk about solidarity, not enough talk about genuine spirituality that's willing to risk and sacrifice and serve the least of these. The name Don Shriver makes a difference, because that's what he stands for, what that cross is all about, who that Jesus really was, what that love supreme that John Coltrane played about, on the vanilla and chocolate and red and yellow and other sides of town. Don Shriver. I'm not romanticizing. I'm not idealizing. I'm talking about my fallen, fallible, magnificent Christian brother, Don Shriver. Thank you, Brother Fred.
Thank you, Dr. West. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it now back to Isaac Sharp. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Dr. West, which was another gift that I was given from the institution still existing. Was Dr. West was one of my first doctoral advisors during my first doctoral seminar here, and we spent it talking about Roberto Unger and Coltrane and Marx and Chekhov and Baldwin and Dostoevsky. And where else can you do that in the world? You know, this is just true. And if it wouldn't be Union if we weren't running a little long and running a little out of order, but I'm gonna imagine we're all enjoying our time together and keep going here a little bit and kick it over to my advisor, the person who I said was partially and mostly responsible for my training and one of the as I said initially, one of the best Christians I know, Dr. Gary Dorian, I believe, is with us now. And let him have a couple of minutes to share as well. Dr. Dorian?
Thanks, Isaac. Well, good evening, friends. I'm sorry I had to come late too. I got tied up in something. I can't tell you how many times I've had to follow Cornel West, and it never goes well for me. So here I am again. But I am going to say a couple of things. Firstly, about the book at both ends, and then something about Don in the middle. Firstly, the book was just Chris Ioso's idea for a couple of years. I mean, Chris carried this thing for the longest time. He got me to write one of the early pieces in it and sent it around. So then he could say to people, hey, he wrote one, you know, you could too. And that's how we accumulated some of these pieces that came in. It was Chris's love and really devotion to this project, involving several trips coming to New York that got it launched. And yes, when I wrote a piece, I did think about the first time I met Don, because it wasn't one you might have expected. I was a student at Union in the late 70s, but of course I was shy and I didn't know anybody back then, so I didn't meet him. But in 1995, I wrote a book called Soul and Society. There were a couple of reviews that came out right away, wonderful reviews by Don Shriver and Stanley Hauerwas. And I thought, well, I'm going to invite one of them to come to Kalamazoo and give a baccalaureate address. I was a little worried about what Stanley might say, so I invited Don to come to Kalamazoo. He got caught in slow traffic coming to Kalamazoo from Chicago, so I had to improvise to a crowd of about 800. When it carried on for quite a while with not even a note card in front of me, never quite decided whether I was going to aim for sentimentality or a prophetic word at the end, but then suddenly comes bursting through the doors of Stetson Chapel, Don and Peggy Shriver. So we got through it. And afterwards, we went to a hotel bar to decompress. I still haven't met him, really. So we're still in that sort of awkward phase of sort of, you know, polite chatter and back and forth and where did you go and where did you come from, that sort of thing. And then he ascertains that, yes, I was a student at Union when he was here in the late 1970s. He took a deep breath, he looked down, and he looked up and says, "My chief qualification for being the president of Union Seminary was my immense capacity for absorbing hostility." I nearly fell off my chair. I thought, this is how he talks, right? But I bonded with him just immediately. I thought, oh my God, there's going to be so much to talk about. And indeed there was for about 2 hours. Peggy chimed into it too. Just all of it, what brought him there and his love of the place and the way he poured himself out for it. And yes, of course, it was real because all of that hostility stuff had lots of stuff behind it. And I thought, yes, this is somebody I hope to know more. I want to befriend down the road because he has that sort of love that Union is in his head, in heart, in a way that I just directly related to, and so expected to be his friend when I got here many years later, and did so. I want to say one other thing about Don's presidency, and then say one more word about the book. And just that word, it's in that piece I wrote, but I want to just make a point of it. Jim Cone had finished out his career at Union because of Don. Jim would have gone to Drew. They made him an offer. He was ready to take it. And he would have gone, except for the intervention that Don made. It's unthinkable to me what Union Seminary is for the past 30 years. If Jim Cone had finished his career at Drew, for God's sake, I mean, I really can't begin, don't want to imagine what it would have been, but just the way I even think about Union, what it is, what it became, all of it revolves around Jim Cone. And that's all just because of Don making an intervention that cost him something, but he got it right. The last thing I want to say, besides just saying, you know, that Don Shriver saved this seminary and he sacrificed himself for it, and he made it better, and I love him for it. And there were some meetings after the articles, the chapters started to come in, but there's still no real book there. And time went on, and fortunately, Serene got involved in it, and there were meetings with Don back and forth. And then finally, we approached Isaac and said, Isaac, are you really willing to pull this together and make a book of it? And I haven't said this to anyone, but actually, after years of worrying about it, I stopped worrying about it that day, the day that Isaac said, yes, he'd be willing to, because Isaac is immensely able and immensely conscientious. And there was just no doubt that this book was not only going to come together, but really become a really good book because of the love and care and intelligence that he poured into it. And the irony is that some of you, that's just the time when you started sort of bombarding me with your anxieties about what about the book, and we're not, you know, what's wrong with you, and how come this thing isn't coming out? And that's, as some of you know, that's when I said, don't worry, we are finally in good hands. This is going to happen now. And so it has. It's a wonderful book. And so I'm grateful to all of you. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Dr. Dorian. I believe we will now kick it over to Rita Walters for a final word from our folks in development.
Yes, so thank you. So this will be quick. I realize I'm standing between you and dinner, but this has been so exciting to be part of this amazing, amazing event. And thank you. I joined the chorus of praise for Dr. Shriver's considerable contributions to the world of religious education. His indomitable spirit is evident throughout the many voices represented in Christian ethics and conversation. So I have my copy. I haven't had a chance to read it. I just got it today, but I can't wait to take it home this evening. So thank you. I want to take this opportunity to thank Reverends Emily and John Odoms, and also Dr. James Forbes, whose contributions helped fund the publication of this book. So thank you to all three of them. It is a tribute to Dr. Shriver's impact on his students and his colleagues during the time of his presidency here at Union, to invest so much into bringing this book to life. Union is committed to further Dr. Shriver's legacy through support for the Bonhoeffer Chair in his honor. Many of you gathered here tonight have already chosen to give generously in support of this chair. And as you heard from Dr. Pollack and Dr. Green, you heard so much about Dr. Shriver's legacy through support of this chair. So you've gathered here tonight. Please consider making a gift, if you will. There is no minimum, there is no maximum, but I would be remiss if I did not ask you to join in the generosity of spirit of both Don and Peggy. So please make that consideration. Tomorrow you'll receive an email from us asking you to join. Dr. Shriver said, he was repeating, and he said, I am because we are, when he repeated Desmond Tutu. And it is very true. I am because you are. And together, when we give and give generously, it helps support the next generation of Bonhoeffer scholars for generations and generations and generations. And we are readying ourselves for the next 10-year-old Isaac Sharp. So thank you in advance for your kind consideration. Isaac?
And that will leave it to me to say the final word of thanks to Dr. Shriver, Peggy Shriver, for hosting me in our weekly conversations there for so long, to all of the contributors who gave the book, to union administrators that put their support behind it, and to all of the friends far and wide who joined tonight in this celebration. I thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you again sometime, hopefully when it is possible to see each other in person. I look forward to meeting all of those of you who I haven't met in person, and to seeing all of you that I have once again. Blessings, friends. Thank you so much, and make sure and order your copies of the book. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.